All right, so I have a basic scene. I'm going to just make a plane here. There's my camera. I'm also going to drop in a character controller. I'm going to apply the camera shake to a first-person controller, because all we're going to be doing really is just moving the camera up and down, left and right, rotating it, and we're going to be doing that through some built-in iTween actions that serve that purpose. And if only those iTween actions actually worked, then the lecture would be very short. But unfortunately, they don't always work right. Okay. So let me drop a first-person controller in there. And then after this, I'm also going to show you guys some more tricks you can do with particle effects. So we're going to blow up some more barrels, but make them more interesting this time. I'm just going to have some cubes in here for kind of like reference, because it can be disorienting if you don't know while the camera is shaking what you're actually looking at. So I have my scene here, and I have these cubes, which I kind of want to just have set up so that they are a point of reference. Have some shadows drawing. Cool. So the first thing that when you're trying to make a camera shake is if you have something like a camera that doesn't move with the character, or that you're moving by yourself, either on a track, you might just be able to do it this way. So I'm going to add a playmaker component to this thing. And this playmaker component, I'm going to start by having it on the camera just wait. Maybe I'll just call this idle. And I'm just going to set up another state, which is called a big shake. And I'm going to set something up so that I'm going to make an event called big shake and transition into here. For now, I want this thing to happen on my right click. So when the right mouse button is clicked, I'm going to go to this state. And the very first thing we're going to try is, if you look for iTween shake, this is a iTween movement that kind of does a shake and it kind of diminishes that shake over time. That's how shaking kind of works. Like, it starts off strong and then kind of peters out. So I'm just going to add that. And this shake has some very few properties. One is how long you want the shake to occur. Another one is how much you want the shake to happen. So in this case, usually you can kind of, this is where your own personal preferences come in. You can kind of have it shake however you want, how much to the left and right you want to shake, which is X, how much to the top and bottom you want to shake, which is Y, and how much forwards and backwards you want to shake. In this case, I'm just going to put 1 in for these values. No delay, and over 1 second. It'll take 1 second for this shake to finish. And then when this shake is done, I'm going to fire the finished event, and then I'm going to close that. Cool. So if I play, really simple, and I'm actually going to select the camera here, so you can see, not this camera, I'll delete this one. There's my camera, and when I right click, does a camera shake. Cool, you can see how it starts off strong and it ends after 1 second. This seems all well and good, seems like the lecture is done, but really the problem is that as soon as I start moving, what happens to the camera up there? Yeah, it gets left behind, because that's how the iTween shake is working. So unfortunately, if you just do this, now your camera is completely offset from your guy, and you've now broken your game. So the first thing that we should do is we need to fix it, because what's actually happening is that the iTween camera shake is shaking the camera, but not restoring the position back to where it was before the shake actually started. So we're going to do that manually. And we can also change this here to be self space. It probably makes sense to shake it in self space. It doesn't really matter much for the camera shake. You'll still have this bug where the camera gets left behind. So the first thing we're going to do is I want to set the position of the camera after the camera is done shaking back to where it was originally. So I'm just going to call a set position on this idle state, and I'm going to set the Y to be point. Let me just copy this. Copy the current transform here. And these are both 0. You have to explicitly set these to 0, otherwise it won't set them at all. I have my camera, and I shake, and notice how it catches up to my player now at the top. The problem is it like pops to where my camera is, which is kind of an issue. So the way that I found to work around this issue, because iTween Shake is actually, it is the thing that we want to use. It has the correct behavior for shaking, and it has some nice parameters. Like, we can tweak it a lot without having to worry about blending it. It does all that stuff for us. Is we're going to move the shake. What we actually want to do is actually want to shake a different object, and I'm going to use that different object. I'm going to figure out how much it's moving, and I'm going to apply that movement to the camera. Instead of the shake moving my camera directly, I'm kind of having a separate object that I'm just using to figure out how much it's shaking. I'm going to add that to the camera instead. So I'm going to make like an object that all it does is it shakes. So I'm going to add one here. I'm going to make an object. Shaky. Call it shaky make object. So I'm going to move this behavior onto that object. So I'm actually going to copy this component here, paste it here. And the camera shake really doesn't need to do anything except for, that's OK. I can actually disable this for now. And in this case here, we'll shake the owner. So now I have this object. I'm going to actually reset its position. And I'm going to tag it with something like that. Now play. When I right-click now, the object shakes, but my camera doesn't. Cool. So I can use that object, and all I want to do is I want to apply that object's movement onto my own. Notice, though, that it still has the problem of kind of getting left behind. So we're going to do this. The first thing I'm going to do is make sure that this thing is set at 0, 0, 0. And I'm going to go to my camera. Re-enable this. So instead of this thing shaking itself, I'm going to delete this component for now. I was just proving that we can shake another object, so you can use this for anything that wants to shake. What I'm going to actually have this thing do is I'm going to have the camera shake the target object. That's the first thing I'm going to do. I'm going to drag this object here. So that's going to mean that the camera has the script, and it's going to shake the other object. Cool? So you see the guy shaking up there? And what I want to do is I want to calculate how much that thing moves, and then apply that to my own position. So I'm going to get the position. Of this object. And I'm going to store it in a vector. Here. And I'm going to set it up so that I'm going to add that offset. It's moving on its own time, and I'm going to just apply that to my own camera's position, so that my camera will always be moving with my character, but the shaking will just get added on top of that. So this position here, what it's actually doing is getting me how much that thing is moving. This vector that I'm currently debugging over here is going to show me how much that thing is currently shaking. Oh, and I need to set it up so that every frame, and keep that in view. So watch this vector here. So notice how it's actually moving. That's because that's how much it's thinking it needs to shake. That's the offset I want to apply to the camera. And right now, I want to get this position in self space. So now when I shake it, that is just telling me how much I should move my camera. Cool. Another thing is that right now, this object is getting left behind because I'm moving it with the player. I'm going to change this. I want the object to kind of stay put. I don't want it to move at all, ever. So I'm actually going to have it, all these things parented to a player object. I'm going to move this guy here. And I'm going to move this shaky object used to be parented to the controller, but this thing would move with the controller, and I don't want that. All I want this thing to do, I don't want it to follow the player, because then you have that bug where it gets left behind. I don't need it to follow the player. I'm only using it for position. So I'm actually just going to parent it to this guy here, which is just a generic object. And this guy's position gets reset here. I'm going to move this thing up here. And this guy also gets reset. So now what's going to happen is that I've got my two separate objects. My player moves. My object still shakes, but it's on its own up top. So anytime this thing shakes, it doesn't care where the player is. But they're all part of the same object hierarchy. So I can make a prefab out of this, so it'll work right. So I go here, get the position of this shake object. I'm going to add that position to my camera. So I'm going to call vector3 add. I'm going to add, I need a vector for adding to the camera position, which I guess I could actually just use here. I'm going to make a new variable for original camera position. This is this transform right up here. So there's my original camera position. I'm going to add the shake, which I'm going to call, I'm going to rename that guy camera shake amount. I love how it doesn't want to rename. Camera shake amount. Add. So it's going to add the shake amount to the camera position every frame. And then I'm just going to set the camera position, set position of my camera on the owner. I'm going to set it to the original camera position. That's what I'm adding up here, every frame. So all that work means that now, when this shake starts happening, oops, I didn't do it in self space. Also need to do world space every frame, set position. All right. I also have to initialize it on the beginning of the shake. This thing should always be equal to the position of the camera to start. So I'm going to take this guy. Oops. Vector3 set value. I need to reset this original camera position every time because it gets updated. I'm going to actually reset it back to 0.907. Wow. This should be 0.907 too. Cool. All right. So I play. So I'm using a simple way of getting the camera shake to happen no matter where I am. Oops. And somehow I'm adding to the height. I mean, it's following the camera now, but the camera is actually falling through the world. Don't want this to happen. I'm going to take that guy and put him here. 0.9. Set position here. Let's see what happens. The camera shake amount. This guy is correct. Shake position, get the position of the camera shaking, add it to that vector, set the position to this. Let's just see what it's setting it to. Oh, it is shaking the Y a lot. Let's just move this. let's take this shake. One other thing that I did not set is the axes. I only want it to shake on X and Y, which makes sense. So you can limit the shake to be on a specific plane, the X and Y plane, which seems good. And then set position here, vector per frame. Shake it now. Cool. So I have a camera shake that follows the player now. Now I want to actually hook this up to something that is not just on the right click. I want to do something that's more interesting than just the player's camera shaking just because it's random. I'm going to make a exploding barrel real quick, because that seems like a reasonable thing to have. I'm going to take this barrel, and I'm just using this as an example for some other cool stuff you can do with particle systems that you may not have done yet. Because particle systems support collisions too, you can also have particle systems that interact with the environment. So I can have this particle system, I'm going to just color it a little differently. So by default, particles don't collide with anything, but you can actually set the collision enabled, and you can have it collide with the world and have it start bouncing. And you can have it start dampening so it like falls. So I'm thinking that we can use this for the exploding barrel parts. So we're going to explode the barrel, and we're going to replace this with the actual bouncing. I want to actually bounce, and also it's going to die after it lasts a specific amount of time. Another thing you can do is you can just change it, because by default it's always going to be a billboard, but you can actually just use a mesh instead. You can use a cube. You can set it to be default diffuse there. And what we want is, we don't want an emission here. We want to have a burst. And maybe we also want it to collide in the shape of the barrel. So if we line this up right, so the barrel, and we can have it miss from the volume, a random direction. Cool. And shorten this and move this down. We can also change the start size to be random between two constants, so it's not always the same size. You can have it be between 0.2 and like 0.1. Some other things that you should try to do as part of explosions, maybe even just cool. Also, you want to set up rotation over lifetime. This should be how much the actual barrel's explosion spins when it starts. Each one of these is rotating by 45 degrees, 0 to 45 degrees by default. I'm set up to be 360 by 1080. So when it blows up, all the pieces go out and flying. So in the game view, blows up, which seems like a reasonable thing to happen to a barrel, but that's just what barrels do in video games. So I'm going to set this up so that this barrel blows up on right click and tells me to shake the camera, which is going to be here. I'm going to say get mouse button down, call and explode. When the mouse button is down, go here, explode. So I'm going to take this particle system, I'm going to make a prefab out of it. Barrel explosion. Create object. And the object I'm going to make is this. And I'm going to spawn it on my own position. So I'm going to put my barrel here. Oh, I put this on the wrong guy. This guy does not need a playmaker. Cool. So I'm going to left click, right click, spawn an explosion at the barrel locations, and also set the visibility off. Turn off the visibility, wait 2 seconds, and then turn it on again. So that I can just keep having this thing blow up constantly. Yeah. Cool. And as part of the explosion, I need to send an event. I'm going to send it to the camera. Here. The FSM is the name. I also need to go into here and make the big shake event global. Access it here. That's it. So if I play now, I have my barrel. Oh, my particle system is in the level. Okay, cool. And I accidentally set it hidden. Visible. Visible. Not only do I have a camera shake, but it's actually associated with the barrel. Wait 2 seconds. Oops, and I did not. I wanted that. After it's done waiting, I'll do that. Blows up, barrel starts again, I can blow it up again. Of course, my particle systems are still going. But anytime you have any kind of explosion or even like gunfire is a reasonable place to put camera shakes. Things that you need camera shakes on that help a lot too are for player hits. If your player is taking any kind of damage, consider shaking the camera at that point too. Anytime you need more impact with anything, also consider shaking the camera. Oh, and I should go in, and this barrel explosion particle system needs a playmaker component that waits 3 seconds. Let's just say 2 seconds, and then kills itself. That way the particle system doesn't keep going. I can take my barrel, duplicate a bunch of these, my camera shake is a little bit out of control. There you go. And obviously you can add sounds to it too, which will help a lot. I recommend using BFXR for that stuff. Other things you can do with camera shake, it's not sometimes enough to just shake the offset of the camera. Sometimes you also want to adjust the orientation. I'm actually going to tweak this a little bit so it's 1 second, no delay. And I'm going to add an iTween shake rotation. This is actually going to let me tilt the camera along the axes. So I can take my camera and I can tilt it along the x-axis. This is in degrees. I recommend doing very, very low amount of this stuff and for a pretty short duration. If you go a little bit overboard with this, it kind of starts getting crazy. Your camera starts tilting a little bit too much. I'll show you what that looks like here. Of course, now it's like, I don't know. It's kind of your preference whether that looks good or not, I guess. It's kind of disorienting. So I like to do very, very light, something that is hardly noticeable. 5 degrees, honestly, is probably all you need. To the point where you can't even really tell. Oh, and I forgot one more thing too. I should go here. This needs to actually go. I put this in the wrong place. This needs to go right at the very top of this. I need to reset the original camera position every frame, every time that right before I shake it. Otherwise, it doesn't like that. Otherwise, it doesn't add correctly. It just starts adjusting the position of the camera every time. So it was like a big camera shake, and I feel like that's reasonable for an explosion. What we also do commonly is we'll attenuate the camera shake. Means that the camera shake is bigger the closer you are to the object, and is lighter the further away you are from the object, which you can do as well. This camera shaking, the big shake amount here, this position, this amount that you shake, can be driven by how close you are to that thing that is shaking. What we can also do is, why don't we do something that's like a smaller shake. We'll make a little shake. I recommend doing this for bullets. It's really common. Usually it's the battle of like almost having no shake, and you definitely don't want to shake the rotation at all if this is for a bullet shot. And this is going to be like 0.2 seconds, if that, and 0.3 and 0.3. I'm going to set it up so that when I click the left mouse button, actually I'm just going to change this left one here, little shake. So this is like a bullet. It's like little shakes like that. Maybe a shotgun or a rocket launcher. And then you get the big one for that. Cool. So if you have time for your games and you end up with something that you want to do, consider adding camera shake. It'll add a lot to your game and as far as how it feels. I'm going to add sounds too, because I might as well. Oops. Because we're not. Cool. Okay. My favorite tool ever. Play sound. The prefab. And this should be playing at the position of the barrel. Cool. Oh, and yeah, that's right. So there you go. Any questions for camera shake?
I have a question, but it's not related to the camera shake itself. Actually, the particle, can you add two particles play at the same time?
Yeah. I mean, you all you have to do is go to your barrel, or you could just go here and make two particles at the same time.
So they won't conflict with each other, right?
They won't collide with each other. No.
No, I mean conflict, like one play and the other doesn't. I mean, like they will play together.
That's only for lights.
Yeah, you can't unless your quality settings reduce the amount of particles that you have. You're guaranteed to see something for that.
Okay.
So I'll have barrel explosion 2, and these ones I'll change the renderer to, instead of being a cube, I'll have these things be cylinders. And then in here on the barrel explosion itself, I'll have it create both of them here. It's a little crazy. Particles and collision is super expensive. We almost never use them. You can fake them here as well. You don't have to use the roll position here. You can define a plane. So you can actually add a plane that if you know that the barrel is always going to be on the specific kind of ground, you can just specify that it only collides with this thing on the ground. So you can make a plane here if you want. I just do world because it's easy, so in case you have like other objects in the world that you need collision with, it works. You can also set the collision quality low. Cool. All right, any questions? All right, so you guys have the rest of the class to work in your groups. The theme is surrounded for this week and next week. The goal is to have something playable, prototyped, and ready to go at the beginning of next week's class. I'll give you next week's class in class to also work on it. All right, and I'm going to go around and hear what your ideas are.